Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with this special reading. So, hello. We're going to go ahead and get started with this special reading. It has so many names, there's so much going on. So, first things first, it's a blood moon, okay? We're going to talk about that. It is a full moon. We're going to talk about that. It is in the sign of Scorpio, which is the south node. We're going to talk about that. And it is a total lunar eclipse, which is the big thing. We're going to talk about that. So there's four things that we're going to bring up, and we are going to do some readings here to help us clarify the information that is coming across currently. So welcome, everybody. I hope you are enjoying your time during this Mercury retrograde. Crazy stuff. I mean, I'm talking about yesterday, today, perhaps a bit of tomorrow, but leading up into this total lunar eclipse, madness. And it really depends on which house in your natal chart it impacts. And so, if you can find that house, you can kind of narrow it down, but you'll probably already get a theme based off of the foolery that's probably been going on and showing up during this time. But let's go ahead and get into it. Again, hi everybody. I am Jessica. I also go by Jed. You probably know me from Reiki Healing Hope, but we also have Array Tarot, which is specifically and exclusively for the intuitive part messages, interpreting those messages and talking about that. I do offer tarot readings, and so if you would like a tarot reading, it is all booked up for May, but June will be open soon. And if you want to get a reading in June, you have to fill out the link in the description, because it goes fast and there's always a lot of demand. So it's like trying to juggle. It really is first come first serve, and those who sign up, they kind of get the first shot at the next round. Okay, got all the housekeeping out the way. Let's go ahead and get started. So I chose these three decks because I feel like they're going to really apply to what's going on. This one I think is really good for reading these kind of abstract messages. This one right here is really good for looking at the macro view of things. And this one over here is really good for the health and the healing. So with it being in this Scorpio energy, the South Node Scorpio energy, what it's actually bringing up is a need to heal. So I don't know if you all were around at Reiki Healing Hope last November when we had this eclipse in the sign of Taurus. And what I was telling everybody was during that time when the eclipse was in the sign of Taurus, it was all about sacrificing your greatest pain in order to get something. Taurus is about having. Taurus is our earthly sign. It is about, it's about money technically. It can be about business, but it's about having something. Scorpio is about healing, transformation. It can even be the trauma, but more of a conscious level of understanding that trauma. Whereas we look at something like a Pisces, which would be subconscious, not even knowing it's there, but having to work through that and work through faith and things like that. So what I had said during that time was, because the focus was that eclipse in Taurus, we had to take that energy, which was the opposite, the astrological opposite of Taurus is Scorpio. So if that's what's happening, if that's the eclipse is in Taurus, that's how it was back in November, then we have to go back to Scorpio, and we have to kind of use this in order to work through what was coming up on the Taurus side. So you had to sacrifice, give up your greatest pain, emotional healing, deep trauma, in order to get something going forward. So that's really what that represented at that time. Now, coming full circle, we are on the opposite end, still in that South Node energy of Scorpio, but this time the moon is in Scorpio. So we are noticing and we're highlighting this point. So the end goal here is not to get something. The end goal here now is to heal. And you have to go and work through that Taurus energy in order to get to this solution, this destination, or what this total lunar eclipse is trying to explain. So when it comes to this particular total lunar eclipse, in order to heal, you have to give up a toxic codependent habit, something you're doing, something that needs to leave your life, something about your lifestyle, something about that is very physical, some type of habit, visible that you can see. You need to give it up. You need to sacrifice it. You need to give it away. You need to move away. Or I think a better way to put it would be not sacrifice, but to break. You have to break this habit or this codependency. It is essentially breaking a cycle in order to heal. So the goal today is to heal. So for those of you all who are new to all of this moon stuff, so the moon has, its phases every month. It goes from the new moon all the way to the full moon and everything in between. And each one of these periods represents something a little bit different. The full moon is actually a time when you celebrate those initiatives that you put in place when the moon was new. So when the moon was new, about, 15 days after that, that is when the moon is full, and that's when you can kind of celebrate these things that you put into action. And typically it kind of falls on the new moon is, the first of the month, or around the beginning of the month, and the full moon is the mid of the month. And this is how the ancients, the people back in the day, this is how they would be able to track the calendar. There are still societies that live on the lunar calendar, because we understand that lunar calendar is something that before they had their own version of time and things like that, they use this in order to track harvest. They use this in order to track time. Even thinking of those with like uterus and those who have cycles, that cycle is 28 days. You call it your cycle. It is the lunar cycle. It is your moon cycle, your moon flow, or things like that. So that's where that moon energy is. Even the representation of the moon, because we know that the moon rules Cancer. The sun rules Leo. The moon rules Cancer. And Cancer is a feminine energy. But when I say feminine, what I mean by that is the mythology behind Cancer is very related to womanhood. And so you have the mother, the maiden, and the crone. So those who practice divination, those who who are very witchy or Wicca or things like that, it can extend outside of that particular example. They would revere the moon and these stories, these mythologies surrounding the mother, or technically this is the order: the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So those are the three. Okay. So this is the energy of the moon. Now the blood moon, what does that mean? Well, when this moon goes into this total lunar eclipse, there will be a time where the moon will have this tinge of red to it. So what technically is happening is, this is the earth, this is the moon, and there's another thing over here, which is the sun. The sun is really big over here. The sun's rays hit the earth, flow all the way back, and this moon over here, it moves into the shadow of the earth, and that's the eclipse. But those sun rays are being refracted across the surface of the moon, and it creates this blood color. So back in the day, when there weren't telescopes, there really wasn't an understanding of scientifically what is going on. There would be mythology, there would be different things that would be associated with this, and because of that, it took on a heightened mystical and magical powers. So the intention is heightened at this time. And the way that these things work is that whenever you have a day or a certain period in which a lot of people are doing some type of work, some type of esoteric work, and have historically done it, it's like you tap into this infinite cycle of energy. That's when they were talking about like, oh, the portal, or oh, this and that, these things happening at this time, because it just represents a concentrated focus by a lot of people doing this kind of mystical work at this one time across different lineages and different cultures in their own way. And also, this is a lunar eclipse. So when it comes to a lunar eclipse, we're doing shadow work. When it comes to a solar eclipse, we're doing light work. So with this lunar eclipse, we're doing the shadow work. And it is so fitting to be in the sign of Scorpio, because Scorpio is essentially shadow work. So it's not going to be awkward. It's a really good placement. When I say really good, I mean straightforward. It might look a hot mess in your life, but it's straightforward, very straightforward in its placement of what you need to do. So I talked about the blood moon. I talked about it being in Scorpio. I talked about the full moon. The full moon is the time of celebration. That is a part of the moon cycle where you celebrate. That is when the moon is biggest. So back in the day, when they didn't have lights, what they would do is they would look to the sky in order to light up the sky. They would look to the sky in order to light up their life. And so when the moon was fullest, you would have light longer. And so that would be a time of celebration. And hi, everybody. Hi, babies. Hi, everybody in the chat. Because I turned to see all those highs. So, hey, everybody. Okay, so there's that. So I talked about that. Blood moon, moon in Scorpio, full moon, and the total lunar eclipse. Let me see what these other planets are doing. The big thing right now is the Mercury in retrograde. Mercury is in retrograde in Gemini. So all of the typical stuff, I've been talking about this all on Reiki Healing Hope. So you can actually go over there and listen to any of the Mercury in retrograde healings that I have up. We have Pluto also in retrograde, but Pluto is in retrograde most of the year anyway. So, I mean, that's not going to be that big of a deal. But I'm going to give you this placement, but I'm going to explain it to you. Because the moon is important, but the way that the other planets are placed too impacts what's going on. Most importantly being this Mercury in retrograde in Gemini. We have Venus in Aries, Mars in Pisces, Jupiter in Aries, and that's actually really important because Jupiter just went into Aries coming from being in Pisces. Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Taurus, Neptune in Pisces, Pluto in Capricorn. So I would say Uranus going down, don't really worry about that, because the farther a planet is away from us, the longer it's going to stay in that station anyway. So you work through that over time, versus something like Mercury, which is so close to us. It's very concentrated in our face right now. Also, Chiron is in Aries. And these planets that are far away, they're in retrograde more often for longer periods, and they're in their signs for longer periods too. It can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, years and up, going higher and higher. So we approach that differently. But what we're going to focus on is probably Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Not really Saturn. Saturn in Aquarius. That's like a 2-year thing. So that's fine. But that Jupiter, that Mars, and that Venus. So let's go ahead and get some cleansing going. We are going to set this intention just to cleanse. Also, to invoke that energy of this total lunar eclipse. And the total lunar eclipse is saying we have to heal. So that means you have to give up some codependent, addictive behavior that you have in order to heal. So I am cleansing these cards. I'm cleansing the space. I'm cleansing us with the intention that we are going to heal. And you start to realize things. For example, if you believe that you are not worthy, that you are not good enough, and you have a lot of situations in your life that reinforce that idea, you will receive, situations during this time that remind you of those situations, those patterns, but now you're smart enough to know, oh, I am deserving. So it's for the first time you're seeing yourself for what it is rather than the delusion you were in. And you're being given a chance and an option to move on. You're being given a chance and an option to change your behavior and your pattern in the way that you go about things. So Take a deep breath in. Exhale. We are going to be open. We are going to receive these messages. We are just going to be accepting of the blessing that the universe sends to us, whatever those messages are, and we can begin. So thank you, universe, for this opportunity to read on behalf of the community. Please bring across messages of health, wealth, abundance, understanding, and healing. Please bring these messages in clear and succinct and concise ways so that we can be able to interpret this information and use it for our highest vibrational good only. We live in a constant state of understanding, of love, of reverence, and we respect ourselves, we respect the environment, and we respect the communities we are in. Okay, ashe, ashe, ashe. Okay. So what I'm using here for cleansing, this is cinnamon. So this is my favorite cleansing. So I use cinnamon in order to cleanse the space because it is such a grounding herb. And I use, I go to a Botanica and I just get the cinnamon from there, and it's kind of this flaky cinnamon. So I really love using that. So there's a question that says, will the full moon lunar eclipse affect the people who have Scorpio in their big three the most or no? Just curious. If you have a strong Scorpio placement, meaning you have it in your sun or you have it in your rising, I guess we can say the moon because it is the moon and the eclipse is in the moon. So yes, it would affect those people more. But also, if you have it in a place where you have a lot of signs, like for example, if you have a lot of signs in Scorpio, even if it is not in those sun, moon, or rising, it would still impact them tremendously because that is called a stellium. When you have a planet, when you have several planets, 3 or more planets in one particular sign, that is called a stellium. It is a concentration of energy. So if you happen to have a stellium, 3 or more planets in Scorpio, this would impact you too. A little bit deeper, but I'm not going to really kind of get into it because it can get too complicated. You know, whatever house Scorpio is in, you know, the ruler of Scorpio, which is technically, okay, for the traditionalists, the ruler of Scorpio would be Mars. So you have to see what Mars is doing too. For the modern day astrologers, the ruler would be Pluto. So you would go to see what Pluto is doing, because back in the day before they discovered Pluto, Mars, Scorpio was assigned to Mars, and it was right there as a sibling sign to Aries. So it's important to see what the ruler, you know, depending on how you lean, Mars or Pluto, or you can look at both, what that's doing too. But I find that that can be a little bit confusing. And if you're not really used to interpreting information on that level just yet, it kind of makes it more confusing than it needs to be. So we can just focus in that area. What is good is if you happen to know the house that Scorpio is in, you can kind of pare that down to what part of your life you can really focus this on. Also, the total lunar eclipse will be happening between the hours of about midnight to 4 a.m. EST. So this is a time where you would actually go out there and do that work. This is when you do divination work. This is when you do your meditation practice. This is when you do your prayers. This is when you do your cleansing. This is when you do your self-care. This is the moment where the period of energy is the most heightened. And one thing that you can do is you can go write down, you know, what it is. What is this toxic habit, this cycle you're breaking in order to heal? And at that time, in the moonlight, go ahead and burn that and just kind of let the wind, the ashes go into the wind. And that is a representation of the healing. And on the other side of that, the healing on the other side is having to move from a healed place rather than a hurt place. Because when you're in a hurt place, you move different than when you're in a healed place. And knowing that once you let that cycle go, you cannot turn around and recollect it. You will always be able to see at this point this healed energy. And now you have to be responsible with it and move forth in that direction. So let's go ahead and get started. If you have kind of any questions about this blood moon, any updates on your life, go ahead and put it in the chat. So we have balance. And this is a balancing time. What's happening and what the universe is trying to communicate is that you have been in a state of being unbalanced. Meaning you've had some kind of toxic situation, toxic behavior that you have been trying to compensate for, and the universe is rebalancing it to its proper karmic and cosmic order. And so even though you have been trying to accommodate it, the universe is saying, no, you cannot do that. You cannot enable this thing that is not working. It's like whenever, say you have a car or something, and the car has some messed up part of it, right? And maybe the car can compensate in other parts of the car so you can still use it even though it's messed up. Like if you have a car and you don't put oil in it, you can get the oil pretty low in the car before you really just ruin your engine. So you might think because your car works, everything is okay. When in reality is if you never put engine in your car, you are ruining it. So the behavior that you've been having in this area that needs to be healed is like you are the car. You have not been putting oil into it, but yet you've still been forcing yourself to go forward, and you feel like everything is okay because it's still working. But the universe is saying, hey, if you force yourself further, you will, fuck up your engine. Like you will really mess up your engine. And for us, it's not the engine, it's our life. You will really do some damage that will be hard to come back from. We have the night. The night is the representation of when this is happening. Deep in the night, healing in the night. Shadow work is a representation of the night. So this is a very night focus. The lunar eclipse night. So I'm going to look at the chat too. Big facts. You can't take the old mindset and habits with you. You surely cannot. Is it good to manifest at this time, especially during a lunar eclipse? No, you shouldn't manifest. And I think there needs to be some clarity on manifesting, because what you might want to do, you might consider it manifesting and it might not be manifesting. You might just be reaping, or you might be collecting on something that you were owed previous lifetimes or this lifetime, or just karmically. So manifesting means you are starting something new that you this is new in your life that you have no connection to, and you're starting from the beginning. You don't have any energy around that. It's like the difference from starting a new relationship with someone you just met versus getting back in a relationship with a person you've already dealt with. If you're getting back into a relationship with a person you've already dealt with, that's different. That's karmic. That's not a manifesting. Even if you wanted to manifest that person back into your life, that is not manifesting. That's still being in a cycle that you all are in. But if it is a new person that you're getting into a relationship with, that would technically be manifesting because that energy is new and different. So that was just an example in love. So perhaps what you might want to do is you might want to do something that involves healing. And sometimes healing means collecting the blessings of our ancestors, of our earlier life. We're collecting what is owed to us. And though that may sound like manifesting, that is healing. Only child here, just lost my mother to Alzheimer's, in which I was her caregiver to the end, and lost my dad last October. Never been able to be me. So when it comes to that, caregiving themes is really important. You know, when you are a caregiver, you are sacrificing your life for the care of someone else. Especially when you're a caregiver to someone who's older than you, oftentimes you have to give up a important part of your life in which the people that you care for have already lived that life. They already got to go and enjoy that without having to be a caregiver to someone else. So, you know, you can love someone deeply, but it can bring up feelings of resentment. And then having to go through the pain of loss. You know, when you have to be a caregiver, it is so difficult to just be able to be the child, to grieve the loss of the parents, you know, that you care for and that you love, and have to reconcile this too, because sometimes when you're in a caregiver situation, you forego your life. So once those people transition onto their next evolutionary path, you are kind of left here without having a purpose. And now, while you are in a grieving state, you have to go and find your purpose again. You have to find what is important to you, and you have to work through all of those feelings that come with that energy. So this would be the perfect time for that, because this total lunar eclipse is all about healing. So you can go in and heal the multiple levels of whatever it is that you're feeling at this time, during this time, letting go and being able to release. I actually have a story about this particular situation. When I was younger, around 19, I'm in my 30s now, so that kind of gives you like a reference. When I was 19, I had to be a caregiver to my grandmother. And I remember how tough that was. But during that time, I actually remembered a similar situation that had happened years before with my cousin. I have a cousin who's the same age as me. And she was homeschooled, and her mother ended up developing breast cancer. And so she spent a lot of her time having to take care of her mother as her mother was getting to the ending stages of that breast cancer. And I remember when the funeral happened and I went to go talk to her. And I, at that time, we were probably about 17 at the time. I, at that time, really, you know, I had my assumption of how I thought that she would be. And of course, she missed her mother, but she said something that was very profound to me. She said, "Now I can live my life." And in that moment, I didn't know, like, it was just, I was caught so off guard with that. This is the type of healing I'm talking about during this time. During that time, I was caught so off guard because I never thought about how much of her childhood she had to sacrifice to be a caregiver to her mother. Those important moments in her life, you know, wanting to go to prom, even the fact that because she was homeschooled, she never had a break. She never had the ability to leave and to go outside and to do her own thing. So as soon as her mom was gone, she essentially had to start her life. And it felt like the experiences that you would experience if you didn't have to be a caregiver. When you're younger, you know, the coming of age, she had to start right then and there. And so there's so much in that as well. So that comes up with that healing. We have the serpent. The serpent represents the habits, the codependent behavior, the cycle that needs to be broken. So when I'm saying that you have to give up some codependency, some toxicity, some cycle, breaking of cycle, you have to break that. That's what this is. Do you see how this serpent is looking at this tree trunk and these skulls? Okay. And the serpent is smart. The serpent is not the representation of evil. This energy as a whole is a representation of vices. The serpent is just there slithering around, watching other people get caught up in their vices. That's just what the serpent is doing, just slithering around, just watching people do it. And so if you're in a situation where you metaphorically have that serpent show up, that's a representation of vices. This serpent did nothing to you, but simply is basically you kind of came to its home where these vices are happening and you have to give it up. And you're not going to give something up until it is in front of your face and you have to take an action. The sun bear. The sun bear is this representation of this kind of hint at a solar eclipse, meaning in order to get to this manifesting, to ultimately this light work, you have to do the healing, you have to do shadow work. On Reiki Healing Hope, we did like the first 2 years was just pure shadow work before we even got into light work. And that's because it is equally as important. It must be balanced. Remember, you cannot manifest and bring things in your life until you consolidate and get things out your life, because then you will just be, as I say it all the time, an energetic hoarder. Imagine that you had a basement that is messy and full of stuff, and you want this brand new thing that even though you feel like it will bring value into your life, you will end up just putting it in the basement too. But if you get rid of some of that stuff that's in your basement, when you bring this thing that is value in your life, you can then store it in a nice, neat, organized, and balanced way. So the next in the chat says, I'm dealing with homophobia in my home as a queer kid, and I'm finally trying my best to stand up for myself. So for everybody who just came in at this moment, we are doing this card pull on the blood moon, the total lunar eclipse, the full moon in Scorpio. We spent the first portion talking about what all of this means. And this eclipse will be happening between midnight and 4 a.m. EST. So back to this comment of homophobia. The homeless rate of queer teens is one of the highest rates out there of homelessness. And coming out when you're a teenager, when you are not fully able to take care of yourself, can be one of the hardest experiences that one does experience. And the reason why that coming of age is so difficult is because people try to weaponize their responsibility to take care of you as a kid with trying to control who you are and make you in the image that they want rather than just letting you be who you are. So the healing is, number one, having forgiveness. Have forgiveness for where people are. People are going to be stuck. Number two, understanding that when you become an adult, you do not have to have these people in your life. That's why I said have forgiveness, because that way you don't carry the weight and the burden of the way that people treat you. You know, when you have resentment, it is like sipping poison and hoping that the person who hurt you will get hurt. So try your hardest to work through that healing, through that forgiveness. But when I really say forgiveness, I'm not talking about honestly the other people. I'm saying just don't be resentful for them. I'm talking about forgiving yourself. Because whenever you try to be yourself, especially when you're coming of age, whenever you try to be yourself, and those that are important to you or the world around you tells you, no, you're wrong, it can be very easy to turn the blame in on yourself and start to feel like something is wrong, even if you can't explain it. You need to understand nothing is wrong, that you are exactly who you need to be, that you are here to carry out your gift and your purpose, and this is a part of your path. And most importantly, and I'm sorry, family is family. I totally get it. When you are at a point where you're able to take care of yourself financially, to remove yourself from that situation, people need to understand it is a privilege to be around you, and they do not get to be in your life if they are not supportive of you. You will have, if you don't already have now, you will find a chosen family that will support you and love on you greatly. I remember when I came out, I was already, on my own. And I remember feeling like, I wish somebody would. I wish somebody would say something homophobic, because at that time I was just thinking like, I got a list of people I want to cut out of my life, and I just hope you're one of them. That's the way I think. I just hope you're one of them. But do you see how this healing is an opportunity during this lunar eclipse to go in and to do that work, to make sure that you are strong, that any pain that you received or that you had to go through, you understand that it has nothing to do with you. And this theme is actually a theme that applies to everyone. Sometimes bad things happen to people, happen to you, and it's not your fault. Sometimes bad things happen to you and it's not your fault. And it is important, as this person was talking, they were saying they're finally standing up, for themselves. It is very important to understand that just because something bad has happened to you in your life does not mean you should not stand up for yourself. Because sometimes there's this idea that, maybe if you had done something different, it would be different for you. When the reality of the situation is that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with maybe other people. And all you need to do is stand up for yourself. That's all you need to do. Continue to norm that, because eventually people will catch up to you. And guess what? They're going to be looking at you, and they're going to have to be able to apologize if they want to be able to be in your energy and in your space. And shadow, which represents the shadow work that we are talking about. So I'm going to move on to a different deck. I'm going to go into the Sacred Geometry deck, and I'm still going to be reading these comments. Your April reading was too damn accurate about pulling more attraction. Bro, I was having issues. People coming out. That's funny. Oh, that's how you know you're black. Don't crack because you look nowhere near 30s. Yeah, I'm getting to this point in my life where I'm just like, I'm gonna see how low I can, pass for. Like, I think confidently I can pass. I think I could do 19. I'm gonna do 21. I'm gonna try 21, but I think I could do 19. I think I could do 19. Currently a caregiver for a family member, I felt so guilty for working towards my passion because it meant I had to focus more time and energy on that. But I feel happier. Oh my gosh. When I had to stop being a caregiver, even though it was draining me, even though things were happening that was pushing me out of that, I felt so guilty. I felt like I had abandoned my grandmother. And I realized that, like, when she had this accident, she was in her, early 70s. She had already lived a life, and she had lived a full life, and I was just beginning my life. So it's almost like, is that really fair? Did she have to do that at that time? Probably not. And so it made me realize a lot of things. And you can care for somebody, but you can also know that you may not be equipped. Not that you don't love, but you may not be equipped to handle certain things. Me at 19, I was nowhere equipped to handle that and to get my life ready to be a caregiver long term, for her. But also, there were things I had to stop. I remember when this happened, I was actually supposed to be staying at a temple. I was actually planning a trip to go to Taiwan. I was supposed to be staying at a Buddhist temple as a study abroad. And so everything was pretty much in order, and this happened, and it derailed, my life. For those who don't know, when I was in undergrad, I studied religious studies, and I also studied psychology. So I was very passionate about, just understanding, different cultures and how we interpret as, people, the divine in our different paths. So that was something I was really excited and looking forward to, and I wasn't able to do that. I had to derail. And I think I should have gone, because I think no one would have thought anything different if I had, said I can't do this at 19. But I also knew, especially when I look at my natal chart, I have a strong South Node Cancer placement. I have Chiron in Cancer. And so I was a very nurturing person, very, self-sacrificing. And so I had to work through that by developing stronger boundaries in my life. So we have the crown chakra, and we have this in reverse, and it says, the frequency of the crown chakra, the violet flower of life, supports our spiritual connections to the universe and our ability to transmute negative energy into light. So this is what we're talking about when it comes to healing. When you are healing, it means that something negative has happened, situations, circumstances, events, and things like that. It can be multiple things. It doesn't just have to be one thing. But these are negative things. But transmuting that into light, transmuting the negative energy into light is healing. When you get to a place and you understand, I didn't deserve to be treated this way. I didn't deserve to be treated this way. That is turning that negative energy into light. And it has to be released from your body. It has to be released from your soul, released from your spirit, and released from your energy as well. Been journaling my dreams since the retrograde began. Yes, you are doing it, because we were talking about that on Reiki Healing Hope. I am so glad, and I hope you have been enjoying that. I'm so excited for my future again. I hope tonight's blood moon will help me to cleanse out those things still holding me back and causing fear and pain. Also very happy to be here. Well, welcome. And I'm so glad you brought up fear and pain, because fear and pain is one of those themes that will come up for us to be able to work through. So we have the divine feminine that comes up. Oh, here are the numbers too. We have this 7 in reverse. We have 21 in the divine feminine. The divine feminine says the frequency of divine feminine supports our receptive, nurturing, and soft side, allowing it to express itself openly and helping us to connect to our intrinsic understanding of our connection to all of creation. So you have to find this soft way of supporting yourself. You have to find this soft way of healing yourself. You might be used to being hard all the time, but you have to find this soft way. I actually just posted a TikTok on my Instagram, and you can check it out. And I just felt so moved by it, because it was this woman, this Black woman. She was talking about Black women having high functioning depression. And she said at the end, she was just kind of talking about it. I think it was a Twitter thread that she saw, but she said at the end that the reason why it was so scary is that Black women are taught to handle this high functioning depression with grace. And in that moment, I felt so moved, because I remember being that 19-year-old, I want to say girl, but it was very womanly at that time, but like that 19-year-old me, and going to school full time. I was in school full time, and I was working full time across 2 jobs. And I remember I just wanted so bad to at least, if I could take a semester off at school, or if I could quit one of these jobs or something like that. But I knew I didn't have that option. Now, as someone who actually used to work in higher education, now I know like the steps that I could have taken. But at that time, being a first generation college student, being the first one in my family to go to college and the only one I knew, you know, I was thinking in that time, wow, if I drop out, I'm going to have to pay back, you know, these grants that I had, because I had need-based grants, and I didn't know how to do that. So I was just like, man, fuck it. If I gotta fail a class, I'll fail a class. So I struggled through the course load. I ended up having to retake a class, and I, you know, did my first job, which was waiting tables. And I remember I got so weak that I went to go take a shower, and I had to put a chair in the shower to sit down because I was so weak. All my energy was gone. And then my second job, which actually is interesting because it was community organizing around suicide awareness and prevention, so around mental health. It's I remember being at that age and feeling like, well, these other people have these real problems. And even though all of this stuff is happening to me, I have to, you know, still get up and do these things. I still need to do these things and X, Y, and Z and da, 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 da. Not realizing that I had been almost like conditioned to not be allowed to break down, to have a freak out moment. And to this day, these are things that I like to check in with myself about, because I know for me, the way that I try to keep myself balanced is I become a little bit of a hermit. I disconnect, and kind of just go and take care of myself, because I spend a lot of time taking care of other people, because I think I bring a lot of peace to people. But I also know that the people who have been attracted to my energy were people who were going through really big crises at the moment. And because of that, what I ended up doing was pushing down things that were important to me in order to focus on them. So I spent a lot of my life being a part of other people's healing rather than taking my healing on in the forefront. And that's where I'm at now. I feel like I'm at a place where my healing comes first. And I feel like I am no good to anyone if I am not, you know, at the top of my healing path first. So we have change. So that's that drastic thing that's coming up. Oh, yes, the change. That's number 12. It says the frequency of change supports our ability to gracefully dance with the forever changing nature of reality, both inward and outward, so that we can appreciate the sweet release of the old and the birth of the new. So that is everything we're doing now, releasing that old. I'm looking at the chat. It says, I'm 30 plus and I still struggle with self-loathing as a trans person. For sure, gets started on the things. Jet is saying it takes a while to internalize. Sometimes, you know, the world can make you break yourself down, because think about it. You could feel like, I'm happy when I do this, or I feel good just being this or that, or this is what I want, or this is who I am. And if enough people in the world, especially in different situations, tell you you're wrong or give you the message that makes you feel like you're the problem rather than it's their mentality, it almost creates this environment that you start to attack yourself. Because if people so easily attack you and you just want to be accepted and you just want to be a part of the collective, you are receiving these messages, you know, subconsciously, that the correct thing to do is to attack me. If you're attacking me, I should attack me too. And the reality of that situation is these people need to be checked. And these people being allowed to continue with discriminatory thoughts, with painful interpretations of realities that is not theirs, is not actually helping their actual soul. their karmic journey and their karmic experience. You know, it's interesting how when you look at people who were like, because I was actually just looking at this kind of like documentary about how the experience of Black people in the 80s and how things were. But when you look at people and say someone was in a time of the 80s and they were particularly discriminatory when it comes to race, when you look at those same people today, there has probably been a shift. Now, that doesn't mean that they're totally different, but there was an understanding at some point, a humility, a humanity even in their eyes, where they realize this is not right. This is not energetically correct. And then from that moment, they start to have to go in and do the work of working through all of the pain that they caused. And a lot of times people are, you know, nobody is born in a vacuum. They're born into systems that supported that. And they began and they behaved that way in order to be accepted during those different time frames and things like that. So it is so important that we all take individual responsibility for our mindset, for our behaviors, for our actions, for our interpretations. It is okay to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, it's all about growth and realizing that. So sometimes I even like disconnect from, you know, social media, because I find it interesting that we can kind of be on our devices for so long that when we look up to look out into the world, we try to use the criteria of our devices in the real world, and that's not how it is. You know, like the real world is working differently than online. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, being online. We are connecting right now online. But when a person is in a event with someone else and they're in their phone and they're taking pictures of the event, but they're in their phone and they're crafting and curating their life to look a certain way online instead of just putting the phone away and just enjoying the event, or, you know, whatever that is, we lose that experience that we're having in life, because we as a species, you know, we are adaptable, but our technological revolution has been a recent phenomenon in the history of our species. You know, our species showed up about 200,000 years ago. We actually just started cultivating agriculture 20,000 years ago. But think about it. We just developed this technology that we're using in the past like 30 years. So if we had hundreds of thousands of years to be able to adapt to this technology, you know, I'm sure life would look different, but we would be better acclimated. But still, our physical body is working on the energy or the flow of our ancestors. So we do have to find a way to ground. We do have to find a way to still be connected with that. So many people just project their issues onto others, especially if there's a good quality in you they resent. Yes. If they have, you know, if they feel like sacral chakra, if they feel like what you have is taking away from them, but also people can be intimidated by your freedom to be yourself. You know, they feel like they're suppressing themselves. So when you are free, it really like hurts them. It really pulls them down because they're forcing themselves down. So this sacral chakra popped out, and we know this has everything to do with creativity. And so the frequency of the sacral chakra, the orange flower of life, supports our ability to flow with our desires. So desires are important, and stimulate our creative power to manifest success and abundance in our life. So that is super important. We also have authority in reverse. And so before I read the definition, this is really coming off as you need to change who is your authority. Your authority needs to be more within the center self rather than external and outside of you. Because if people make you feel not good about yourself and you see them as authority just because a lot of people are saying it, it is no longer working for your energy and spirit. So you have to see yourself inside. Even think about when you want something. Sometimes people, ask the universe, myself included, can I have this? Can I have this? Can I have this? But that's not how the universe works. The universe works in a co-creation, meaning you say, universe, I want this. I trust you. Please guide me in the direction there. And you have faith in that direction. You tell the universe where you're going. It's like you're steering the car of your purpose and your path. You have to take that responsibility. But sometimes people are so used to looking for that outside of them that they don't do that they're looking for a savior. They're looking for, some big authority to promise them 100% that everything will go according to plan and to be smooth and this, and that. When at the end of the day, you are the power. The power is within you. The power grows within you all the time. And allowance. The frequency of allowance invites us to be open to whatever comes our way. So that's exactly what I just said. I said that when you co-create, you say to the universe, I want to get here. Please show me how, and I trust you and I have faith. So that says it invites us to be open to whatever comes our way without judgment, without opinion, without fear, and without resistance. When we allow, the universe becomes our partner in the wondrous dance of existence and expansion. That's co-creation. That's exactly what we've just been talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to another deck as well. Thank you so much, Jet. That means a lot. Yes, love. Yes, love. Oh, and now we have another caregiver experience. And it makes sense why the caregiver experiences are coming up, because this blood moon, this full moon is in Scorpio, and that is a very caregiving sign. It is even if I am in pain, even if this interaction between us is uncomfortable and difficult, I don't mind making the sacrifice in order to heal us, or in order to protect us or to support us and things like that. So it says, I was a caregiver for my mom at 21 years old. I used to feel bad about going out. I would feel guilty about leaving her at home while she was sick with cancer, but she wanted me to live my life and be happy. And what a healing thing that your mother was giving to you, so that you had an opportunity to still be able to live life and to have your life continue as she was living her destiny and you all having these moments together. I have my note with my codependent behavior all written up and ready to burn. I'm excited to do some healing and possibly some magic. Yes, babies. I took care of my grandmother in the last year of her life, as I was also being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which we know as an autoimmune disease, and we'll talk, or disorder, and we'll talk about that in a second. My significant other was the only thing that kept me going through it. It was a lot. So autoimmune disorders are very interesting, because when we look at autoimmune, we know that immune is the immune system, and your immune system is so that any, intruder situation that happens, your body fights it off. Autoimmune means the body begins to attack itself. And with conditions like multiple sclerosis, what ends up happening is that if you, do an MRI of the brain, there will be lesions on the brain. Sometimes there are spots on the spine, and then it starts to mess with the actual skills of the person. So they might have a tingling, they might have some type of nerve situation that's happening because the body is attacking itself at that. And that's what the autoimmune is. So if you have another disorder, for example, I had and have worked through having cholinergic urticaria. So that's heat hives. It is a situation in which my body could not regulate its body temperature. So it was having an allergic reaction whenever the temperature would fluctuate. So the body is thinking that the heat of my own body changing was an allergen and it was having an allergic reaction. So the autoimmune is very fascinating because it gives us the opportunity to wonder, not even to wonder, to investigate the moments of being hard on ourselves. And that's not the only thing, but knowing that sometimes the message with those kind of situations is, are we our biggest critic? Do we give ourselves the least amount of grace? Are we more understanding to others than we are to ourselves? Do we find others more valuable than ourselves? Are we the least valuable people? So all of these behaviors that I had, in which I was sacrificing myself for others and putting myself last, started to manifest in that kind of way. And my significant other at the time, that I was developing that autoimmune condition, also, she had developed MS. And watching that for her was a new experience for me, because even though she could afford to go to the best doctors, even though the doctors were saying, you've caught this early. She was even pre-medication. She didn't have to take any medication and things like that. I just saw how her energy changed and her energy shifted. And ultimately, I strongly feel that that is a part of the reason why our relationship couldn't go any further. She never had to experience something like this, having to confront her own health. And it kind of took her to a very, very low state. And when these things happen, sometimes they give us an opportunity to care and love on ourselves more as we are going through this healing journey. So thank you so much, love, for sharing that. So speaking of health, I pulled these out because these are the health related cards. So it actually is herbs. So I'm going to look them up too. We still rocking together. We still rocking out. We have red clover, marshmallow, a spoonful of sugar, center and grounded. I actually am going to get this book. So this is this book. And it's it is an oracle deck that also has these herbs on the cards. And it's a nice way to learn the healing property of these herbs. And I like how the conversation kind of went in that direction. So this one, so we had marshmallow, page 104. And yes, marshmallow is a real thing, not just those puffy things that we eat. 104. And so these are some of the healing themes that could be coming up. So marshmallow. There's nothing Marshmallow would love more than to spend time in your kitchen. She'll lean over your shoulder, offering suggestions for adorning your salads and thickening your soups. There's no reason for foul-tasting anything, including medicine, declares the grande dame of dessert. She should know, having been at it since around 200 BCE, Egypt, dear, she'll tell you a lovely place. I fed pharaohs and gods, but marshmallows not one to dwell in the past. She takes too much joy in bringing ease to the present. And there's much work to do. Digestion, so we'll talk about that in a second. Digestion these days. She ticks as she sets about creating her latest confection. Call on a marshmallow when you need to soften and rediscover your sweetness. So we were just talking about autoimmune, and we're talking about how, being hard on the self, even being super critical of the self, and the reverse of that, going on that healing path, is to work on being extra nurturing, extra caring, extra sweet towards yourself. It might even be something totally new. Oh, thank you, Mary. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you, baby. Having this energy and being extra sweet to yourself. Autoimmune disorders also, are very interesting because they are highly correlated to your diet. So even though environmental situations, because we had lived in an apartment that had long-term mold exposure, even though those can be things that bring on these autoimmune conditions, the way we eat ourselves the way that we eat in our everyday lives is a way that we work towards treating these things too. Because if you are in an autoimmune situation, you want to be reducing the inflammation that you have in your body. You do not want to be eating foods that are inflammatory to your system, because the root of any illness, any issue is inflammation, and that inflammation creates the disorder that shows up as whatever the condition is in the body. Minus like something like you break your bone, like what's broken is the bone, things like that. And so food is one of those things that we can do to heal ourselves, or to be supplementary on the healing path as we are getting other treatment as well too. And so for autoimmune, there are certain foods, like there's something called the autoimmune protocol. I think the doctor is Dr. Welsh. I have to remember what her name is. But she created this autoimmune protocol in which you're eating certain foods that work better for those who have autoimmune disorders, in order to bring down that inflammation, give your body a break so your body can heal itself, or can be healing towards that. And so I actually want to, let me see, autoimmune protocol diet. I just want to say, yep, Hashimoto's is another one. It's called the AIP diet. Thyroid issues. I just want to get the doctor's name so that you can do your own research. Yes, that's who it is. I think it's, I said the wrong doc. No. Something Dr. Is it Terry? Oh, yes, I was there. Yes. Terry Walsh. So I'm going to put this just in the chat for those who may be working through autoimmune things. And also, it's just self-care in general. You don't even want it to have to get there too. But yeah, so Marshmallow is talking about digestion. Digestion is important as well for the immune system, because 70% of our immune system is in our gut. The bacteria that is living there, that is helpful and beneficial to us, it breaks down fiber. Okay, so it breaks down those, those vegetables and things like that. That fiber, it breaks that down, and it is our immune system. So it is important to have a healthy diet for that. So you got to eat a lot of good leafy greens, things with a lot of insoluble fiber, or just fiber in general. And so fiber is a carbohydrate that we cannot physically break down, but the bacteria in our gut love it. And if you want to strengthen that, you want to feed them a lot of fiber. So when you take a probiotic, you have to take it with a vegetable, or it will the bacteria will not be able to survive, as many of them will not be able to survive through the digestive system and the stomach acid and stuff like that. So it's twofold. You're reintroducing those bacteria into your body through taking a probiotic, but you also have to take fiber. And fiber, if you look at it on Amazon, would be considered a prebiotic. So you're taking those together so that it has something to fuel on as it is repopulating your digestive system. And that within itself can be very healing. I know some people who go through really tough treatments that really ruin their immune system. Sometimes they get, and I know this sounds interesting, but they get a fecal transplant, where they go to someone with a very strong immune system and they do that, like that, in order to have them recolonize and repopulate their gut and their intestines, because it is so important. So that's what, I know we took it there with marshmallow, but that's what marshmallow is talking about. And then, so this is all healing, babies. This is all healing. And then 24 is red clover. So we're going to see what red clover is talking about. I hope you all are enjoying this. I am. Centered and grounded, red clover. This commonly cultivated forage crop feeds horses, cows, sheep, goats, and just about anything else humans keep at pasture. She plants your feet on the ground, 2 or 4, it doesn't matter to her, while encouraging you to run a few miles or dive into that art project you've been avoiding. Red clover wants you to get moving in body and in spirit. So this sounds a lot about that sacral chakra we were just talking about. She loves grounded action and will happily bolster your courage. From the Latin word cor, which means heart. When you're acting from a strong center, so you can step out and move forward. Bold but not rash. Do you get what that means? Bold but not rash. It means you're not making just a quick decision, but you are making an impactful decision. Red clover gets your blood up so you can show up fully. So if you have been feeling lethargic lately, if you have not been feeling like energized, or you've been feeling demotivated, or you don't really have that creativity, they are suggesting that that is something that it can be used here. And they're saying that it is associated with the heart. Now, let me say this when it comes to herbs. Make sure you understand what herbs you can use within your body and what herbs are not, for your body, and what you should and shouldn't be using together. Herbs are those phytochemicals, and they can have interactions with each other. But more importantly, I think they can cancel out things. Like, for example, if you want to take, if you want to take iodine, which we find in sea vegetables, or we also have iodized salt. If you want to take iodine, you can't really take it with cruciferous vegetables. So that's our broccoli, that's our Brussels sprouts. And even it extends past that to things like cassava. There's like a list, because there is an inhibitor in these things that blocks out the body's absorption of iodine. So even though iodine is good for us, it is good for our thyroid. And that's also depending, as long as it is not a hyperthyroid, as long as you're not having too much thyroid stuff going on. That is a positive thing for us, especially if you have hypothyroidism, where there's an working underproduction. That's why, I'm going to get to the point, but that's why it's important, like when you see things like sea moss gel, Irish sea moss gel, that you be very clear with your actual micronutrient needs, because if you have a hypothyroid and you are taking that extra iodine in, that can exacerbate a certain problem. I actually had somebody that this is funny. I had another person that I dated, and they would religiously take sea moss gel, and they felt like it really helped their immune system during the pandemic. But I noticed that they had this bit of like sunken eyes, and I was looking at their previous pictures before, a couple years ago, and I was trying to figure out, was this an age thing? But I had actually said to them, do you think that you might have hyperthyroidism? Do you think that you might have an overproduction in your thyroid? Because I'm just noticing, with your eyes, you might want to just go to your doctor and just suggest, can you look at my iodine levels? Those are just simple tests that you can take, and that if you have health insurance, it's typically covered by health insurance. And I think they kind of were just very dismissive, but it's just understanding that the herbs come with responsibility too. Same thing with something like magnesium. Magnesium is good for you, but if you take zinc with magnesium, it'll cancel out the magnesium. So understanding how these things are for you, you can't just blanketed take anything, and you have to do the research. You have to be very responsible with these things. And everybody's body needs something different. Like I actually went down this whole rabbit hole of diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and what type of nutrition plans people are using. And I found it very interesting. Oh, another one, alopecia. That's an autoimmune condition as well. What I found very interesting is that type 1 diabetes, which is someone who learns that they have diabetes early on in life, probably, kind of to the point where they're a teenager, they're typically more slender in build, and that's important to note. And they are insulin dependent. Those people will have different dietary needs than someone with type 2 diabetes, which is the type of diabetes that develops through something like overconsumption of food, so like obesity or something like that. And so typically type 2 diabetes can be reversed. Type 1 diabetes is something totally different. So even the constitution of the person is very different. So we can't just say blanketed, this is good for diabetes. We have to understand what type it is, and you got to understand the person too. You have to understand the person. Like for me, I have a lean PCOS. I've had it my entire life, and that's a part of what got me on this healing journey, just having all of these issues. But most of the people who at that time when I learned about it, the research, most of them were not lean people with PCOS. And so the advice to resolve it was to, do things like lose weight or change diet and things like that. But for me, that actually wouldn't make sense. And also I had lean PCOS, but I wasn't, malnourished. So that is another way that PCOS would come. So I was kind of like a regular size. So I had to realize that all the advice that was out there, I had to choose the ones that made sense for me, So that's just a little bit of responsibility. So we're talking about healing. For those who just popped in now, we're talking about healing, these healing themes that are coming up during this blood moon. But I wanted to just keep on going through this. Yeah, we on here. We chilling today. I'm so sorry that you went through all of that and didn't have the option to take a break or pursue your passion the way you wanted to. That is so sweet. I just graduated college yesterday, and I have a Scorpio moon. I'm hoping the eclipse brings a lot of change for me. Yes, baby, it surely will. Oh, I came at the perfect time. I know that's right. I just came in, currently doing homework, but have you in the background. But wow, thank you for lovely reminders. Yes, love. Biologically, we are living thousands of years in the past. Yep. I mean, it's amazing because think about, the our branch, like we are Homo sapiens, right? But our branch, like the first ancestors prior to that started about 6 million years ago. So from 6 million years ago, okay, to 200,000 years ago, it took that long just to get to us, right? And from 200,000 years ago to 20,000 years ago, it took that much time to get to agriculture. And yes, people like when I try to explain why agriculture is so important, because you have to imagine for 180,000 years, we were nomadic and we were wandering around. We would not stay in one place. I mean, obviously, there are certain things like predators where if we stayed in one place, we might get attacked, or we might be hunting something, or we might be trying to get food in different areas. Maybe our food dries up here. So it took us 180,000 years before we learned agriculture, meaning we learned how to cultivate grains like the wheats, the grasses, the wheats, the rice, and things like that. And when we learned how to cultivate grain, that's when we built our first societies, because prior to that, we were nomadic, and we were in communities, and occasionally we would, interact with others, but you had to strategically kind of go and be able to get your own food and things like that. We didn't have a civilization that could support. You need numbers, don't get me wrong, back in the day, but we couldn't support everyone. Like, for example, if somebody was elderly, you probably eventually left them somewhere, to the elements or something like that. Or if someone got hurt, we didn't have a civilization that could support them. So 20,000 years ago, when we started to develop those agricultures, and we can look at the great examples we have of is like looking at ancient Egypt or the ancient Mayans and things like that. When people were able to cultivate that, then people started to have like specific tasks and roles outside of just collecting food. Then you had things like law and order. Then you had things like advisors. Now, don't get me wrong. The medicine people of indigenous cultures from way, 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 way back then, the first people of, the different places of the world, they were doing this even when they were nomadic. They were still coming up with their mythology or interpreting the messages that they were, receiving from the stars, from, things that were happening to them. But once you actually had a civilization, then you had people who were distinctly doctors. You had people who were distinctly builders. You had people who were doing this. You had people who were doing that. And there was more protection in a civilization. So the city of Jericho, which they have mentioned before in the Middle East, is kind of how people say was like the first civilization. But I think it's one of the first well-documented examples, because they had this really big wall. You can look at kind of biblical texts to talk about this, but they had this wall. And for that first time, it kind of, yes, it kept people in, but it kept people out. And it was a way of safety in which people had not known before, but they would not be able to do that if they weren't able to cultivate grains and things like that. I know that these kind of conversations can be like, what? But I love to look at our species over like the hundreds and thousands of years, because I think sometimes we feel limited to go back to sometimes we just be going 2,000 years back, or 4,000, or even, maybe 6,000 years back, but we were doing a lot. Like, it took us a long time to get to a lot of places. And even our diet nowadays, with like all of these processed food and, Even our body's ability to digest grains, it's really actually interesting. We're still acclimating to grains, and I know that that's kind of funny to think about because it's been 20,000 years, but some people struggle with gluten, which is a protein in grains, which we see in wheat and things like that. Some people struggle with lectins, which is a protein in grains. It's a protein in various kind of like fruits and vegetables and things like that, that these things are very destructive to the lining of our digestive tract. And when we have things like leaky gut or interruptions in our digestive tract, number one, our immune system, we were just talking about our microbiome, the bacteria in our gut, they're not able to flourish there because there is trauma there, there's inflammation. Also, when you have these openings, then things in the digestive tract start to seep into the bloodstream. And that is what really wreaks havoc in our body. That's how we can have these autoimmune conditions, because the body starts to attack itself, because these things typically would not be able to make it past that membrane. But having these tears that come from that diet, from the diet and things like that, can really impact us in a negative way. So then we also have Lady's Mantle, Fortitude. So this is page 88. Oh, Elderberry is a good one too. Fortitude, Lady's Mantle. Lady's Mantle will be there when you're ready to wrap a blanket around your shoulders, call in her protection, and enter the dark forest healing shadow work. She whispers, you can make it through this lifetime. Karmic, this is resolving things. Your soul is whole, and no matter what pains or abuse the physical world throws at you, you have integrity of spirit. She's particularly wise in case of trauma, Scorpio, murmuring the names of the roads that will carry you through and out of those dark woods. Lady's Mantle doesn't demand, she waits, knowing you'll find both bravery and fortitude within. She never loses faith in your strength, and with her help, neither will you. I'm going to look this up a little bit more because they didn't necessarily say like medicinally how you would use this. It's looking like something like a tea, but this is for when you are kind of losing in spirit. Yeah, it's looking like tea. I'm seeing things like tea, seed, progesterone. So this might be something for the endocrine system to regulate that. And we know that the endocrine system also connects to the central nervous system. So our brain, and how our brain is in a state of homeostasis. Homeostasis means that the brain is in the state of balance. So things are working efficiently. And when things are thrown off balance, that's when we have certain conditions that show up, and our brain is not in that. So I'm just gonna, you just look that up. Growing Caring. What is it used for? It's traditionally used to mend and connect torn tissues, making it helpful in conditions such as torn eardrums, hernias, muscles, tooth extractions, and general wounds. Lady's Mantle is also thought to have some nervine properties and has been used by herbalists for insomnia and anxiety. So I'm not 100% sure if for the wounds you put it on topically or you ingest it. I'm thinking that for the wounds it is a topical thing, and for the anxiety and the insomnia, it is a tea. But of course, that is, like I said before, something that you go and you research and you look up all of that information as well. I was always told, even as a child, that taking care of my parents when they were old was why I was born. It was my job. I did it. I came back and took care of both of them until their death. That's very interesting, because it's almost like when you think about you're a kid and, your parent gets mad at you. And I guess some kids, I never thought to say this, but some kids would say, I didn't ask to be born. And technically, you didn't ask to be born. But it's very fascinating that they specifically said, this your job, and you lived out that job to do that as well. But your job is a part of your path, whatever that path is. But it says, now I feel guilty for feeling free and don't know where to go. So that was an important point that we were talking about and discussing earlier about being a caregiver, because when being a caregiver is the centerfold of your life to the point where you have to give up certain things. Once those people transition on, if you had to give up so much of your life, it's almost like you're starting from zero. It is the example that I gave with my cousin, where she had to start from zero after her mom had passed away. And her being so young and doing that, it's almost like, because she was also homeschooled too, she just had to go through life like all over again, like in had to do these things that these coming of age things at that time. Even though she was still young, it was things that she probably should have experienced when she was younger. And now she doesn't have, at that time, she didn't have, a parent to be able to turn around and allow her to just be a kid. She had to be a very mature, she had to be in a very mature role at that time. And so once you reclaim your life, which she had talked about at that time, you then almost have to figure out, well, what am I going to do with this? Because a part of your identity might have been being that caregiver. And so this is a part of your healing path, not feeling guilty to be able to live out your full life, to give yourself equal, if not more, nurturing and care and caregiving yourself. Because you may have been primed to do that for others or for certain people, but now it's time to give it to yourself. And there were many times where you had to push down what you wanted and to suppress what you wanted in order to do the right thing. And you built that cycle. So remember what I said at the beginning, you're breaking a cycle. You have to give a cycle up in order to get healing. You are breaking that cycle that no longer works for you. You are breaking that cycle up. And now you are receiving this new energy for your healing. I hear a rock on. I appreciate that. Thank you for breaking everything down and explaining so succinctly. Thank you for sharing your energy with everyone. May your energy be healed tenfold. Oh, that is so beautiful. OMFG, that's so pretty. Oh, this deck is beautiful. I love Marshmallow. Come through educational. A major part of my healing has been overcoming stress. I've noticed my stress stems from a weird sense of guilt for all the things I should do, and this ego belief I'm responsible for being perfect. Sometimes instead of something being wrong, sometimes it's just never properly learning how to live your life, your specific life, in the way that you need to live it, And so we might be hard on ourselves thinking like, oh, there's like a right or wrong way of doing things. And understanding like what I had mentioned earlier on, which is sometimes bad things happen to you and it's not your fault. Sometimes bad things happen to you and it's not your fault. We kind of feel like everything is like cause and effect, like this created this and da 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 da. But there will be scenarios in your life where something bad happens and it's not your fault. And you still have to work through all of that. You have to work through all of that healing. Because if it is not your fault and you struggle with placing the responsibility on someone else because you don't feel like you have control there, sometimes you may internalize it. If you say it's not your fault and it's nobody's fault, well, someone probably does have a little bit more of the onus. But if you have a tough time giving that responsibility back to others whom it applies to, the cards we selected before, it was talking about balance. You have to rebalance these things. Then, it's super, 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 super important for you to balance yourself, for you to understand that, okay, I didn't create this, but I will heal this. That's a big part of it too. I didn't create this. I didn't create this mess, but I'm going to heal this. I'm going to work through this. I'm going to heal myself. It has nothing to do with other people. You got to go and heal them. No, it has everything to do with yourself. I got to heal this. I got to heal me. I got to heal this path. Science and spirituality. Yes. I love it. It was very informative. Thank you. Love the deck. So beautiful. Oh, I love the smell of red clover. My family owns a dairy and it grows wild in the area. You can pick them and feed them to your cows. They love to snack on them. That's what they were saying. You feed them to your live feed. It said cows and the red clover. It said like cows and sheep and goats and things like that. This was so informative. I have some amazing probiotic tea that's balanced. The Celestial Seasons Tea Well for the fiber and probiotics, but add other prebiotics. Didn't know about the fiber. Yes. Oh my gosh. It is so important for us to eat fiber. And I know usually we think of a certain age, like, older people, you need to get your fiber. And the reason why that's associated maybe with older age is because issues with digestion and, the type of fiber they're taking, which would be like a powder fiber, like Metamucil or something, is supposed to help them with their stool and be able to, go regularly. The type of fiber I'm talking about is not that. I'm talking about the fiber that we naturally get in our foods and our plants, in which our bacteria can then feed on that. It is called insoluble fiber. If you look at a package, like when you look at the nutritional contents of a package and you look at the carbohydrates, it'll say the dietary fiber. That is the insoluble fiber. That's what we're talking about. And that's things, they are not calories we can break down. They're calories that our digestive system, not our digestive system, but the bacteria within our gut, it's what they feed off of. I understand completely. This has been the way for me for 5 years. Wow. What sign are we on? We ain't on no signs, baby. We're just talking about the blood moon. So in the beginning, we talked about the blood moon. We talked about it being a full moon, it being in Scorpio, and it being a total lunar eclipse. At what time? It's going to be from midnight. I think it's like midnight, but it's more leaning towards like 12:40, like 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time. So convert that to the time that you're at. And that's the time where you go out and you do these ceremonies. I love this kind of conversation. Yes. As my parents used to say, I brought you into this world and I can take you out of it. My mom tried that the other day and I was like, girl, I can outrun you. So it's wild. Like I used to, when I was really young, I used to have a very, very I was like a know-it-all. I had a very, very smart mouth. Luckily in life that turned out to be like, I just like to learn things. So I would say very smart mouth things. And back in those times, they didn't call it, abusing your kids to hit your kids. So like, I would get popped several times for the things I would say. But I started to realize when I was older, I'm like, what's she gonna do? The girl can't hit me. How you gonna hit me? You gotta catch me first, right? So I'm like, bobbing and weaving. And now I'm back to my old ways of saying whatever. And she's so funny. I asked her the other day, I said, Mom, how do you think I've changed? She was like, you know what? You're the same person. You're just meaner now. I was like, oh, girl, you're not going to do that to me. You're not going to do that to me because, because I say how I feel. I surely do. I surely say how I feel. But yes to that. Okay, let's see. Let me see. Agriculture is the building blocks of society. Food surplus allows for specialized labor as well. Spirituality, learning, etc. Correct. Oh, you should look at the cities of Ur. Yes. In Mesopotamia. Yeah, Mesopotamia is actually really fascinating because when we look at things like so when we look at the Abrahamic lineages, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, what was going on before this beginning of this Abrahamic lineage of these, huge religions that really are a large followers of, like, what am I trying to say? Large percentage of the population of the world following these, specifically Christianity and Islam. Well, what was happening before? What really shaped the rhetoric? Sometimes for people who don't kind of do like biblical scholarship or like kind of look at the anthropology or the sociology of that time, they kind of feel like it's like Genesis, like, God created everything. And then all of a sudden you jump into this story of like, Exodus, which is those leaving Egypt. So there's like a really big gap of what's going on, at these different times. We do have this understanding of when it looks specifically at that, when it looks at the relationship of, how does Egypt play? But Egypt itself was really fascinating because Egypt, or what it was called by its people, Kemet, it had a very long reign. It had like almost like a 20,000 year reign. Now, it wasn't as strong once like the Greek and the Romans started to really dominate the earth, or that portion of the earth at that time. But it's fascinating. It's like, what was happening before? And so if you want to go down an interesting rabbit hole, go down astrological ages. So, we are in the age of Aquarius, or we're moving into the age of the Aquarius, away from the age of Pisces. The age of Pisces was a big representation of Jesus, because it's the fish. It has this mythology surrounding that. But the bigger picture is that of the martyr, right? But prior to the age of Pisces, it would have been the age of Aries. So during that time, what people did for their spiritual practice had a lot to do with sacrifices. So you see the sacrificing of animals, the sacrificing of, you see references to rams, references to kind of like sheep and goats, but that aggressiveness of the ram, and it was very kind of brutal. It's almost like the mentality of like, sacrifice your son, to God, like that kind of that sacrifice, that kind of mentality during that astrological age. And before that age, Taurus, we saw some in the age of Taurus that, I forgot to tell y'all, each of these astrological ages run about 2000 to 2500 years. And so in Taurus, there were agricultural revolutions there. So agriculture started to change. It became more efficient at that time. So it's so fascinating how these ages, really impacted the mythology and the way that people interacted with the divine. So during that time, the sacrifices would probably have less been meat and more been like fruit and harvest and things like that. So yes, that's super fascinating. Didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole there, but of course you all know, I used to be so, I used to be like, go down rabbit holes all the time. I think that's what had me study religious studies, because originally I just wanted to study psychology, and I took one religion class, And then I realized, like, oh my gosh, I can learn this stuff and I don't have to be a part of it. We can just look at it from an anthropological or a sociological perspective or a philosophical perspective. I'm all in there. Yes, I had a good old time. I really did enjoy it. And that's actually where I started to concentrate my individual practice and my individual focus on mysticism. If you all understand what mysticism is a concept that in all of our religions, all of our practices that are big enough. For example, we can use something like Christianity. We can use something like Islam. We can use, something else. That might be the big religion, and it might have its different sects, SECT, so different groups within it. But there are these groups within all of these, religions that are spiritual and their spiritual focus. And a lot of times they're separate from the religion, because the religion really is about almost law and order. It is about following the rules, and it is about kind of keeping that together. And so those within the spiritual path, they're saying like, okay, I just want the deepest essence, and I understand that sometimes that might look different than what this structure and this order is. So typically they'll separate that, like they call it kind of like, a loose example would be like a monk or a nun or something like that. And a lot of our references to the history of the past came from these people who were these ascetic people, these monks, these people who were very dedicated to some spiritual path. And it's so funny because they would have to go and regulate, the rules of religion, but then they were having these deep philosophical conversations over here about, well, does God really exist? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? Da 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 da. In ways that they were not allowed to have it over here because you weren't allowed to deviate. So that is that mystical aspect. And then you can take that another step forward. We can take it out of the example of Christianity and Islam. We'll take it into something like the Yoruba, specifically Ifa. So Yoruba, and this is a traditional group out of West Africa, specifically Nigeria and Benin areas. Yoruba was the language, it was the religion, it was the group of people. So kind of like how we would say Jewish, it's the language, the people, and the heritage, all that together. So that's kind of like a similar reference. So the Yoruba, it was the people, it was the language, and it was the religion. But the spiritual aspect, that spiritual sect, it was called Ifa, and that is the divination. So when people were enslaved and forced to go to various continents of, what we call North America, South America, the Caribbean, they brought with them that legacy of Ifa, and it transformed. When it got to the Caribbean, we had Santeria, because it was a mixture between the Ifa and Catholicism. Okay. When it hit Brazil, it had a different energy. When it hit the US, you can go like in the South, like South Carolina, going lower, you have the Gullah Geechee people. You look at New Orleans, you have voodoo. When you look at Haiti, you have in New Orleans area, you have hoodoo as well too. So all of these different practices that actually grew out of that. I know we went down like a religious rabbit hole, but it's just so fascinating how things build on top of each other. I don't know if you all are as fascinated as I am, but I am so fascinated. And learning this really helped me to deconstruct how valuable and how important it is to keep the legacy of all of these different faiths going, like the narrative, the important information, and the practices. So when we do this magic stuff, when we do this divination, we are pulling from these traditions that for a long time were barred. Like when we look at indigenous traditions of the Americas, indigenous people here, they were barred legally, not constitution, but like legally barred from practicing their faith, their religion, their everyday way of life. Like there were ordinances and different laws set up that prevented indigenous people from simply doing their indigenous customs and traditions. And so you have that built on top of having a land taken from them, built on top of having their children taken from them. There was a large period of time of these boarding schools, indigenous boarding schools, where indigenous children were stolen, taken to these boarding schools to civilize them, and being highly abused. And this was all, legal and perfectly fine and thought as positive. This happened in the US and this happened in Canada too. So, all of these different customs and traditions are so important to keep alive because they have been suppressed for so long. You think of the example I just gave of Ifa. So those people who were taken captive, who were abducted and enslaved, and they basically tried to stomp their tradition out, told them it was the going narrative is savage, demonistic, negative, just because they didn't know it, because it was different than what they had known. And yet these people still found a way to keep their culture going and even infused it into these new wisdom traditions that they were interacting with. It is just such a powerful story to really to sit and reflect on. I have IBS, so this is another one. I have IBS and need all the fiber I can get. So that's very important for the gut, the intestines, and things like that. Things like collagen also help to restore that. But also, things like IBS, Crohn's, colitis, like these different digestional issues, food is important, understanding what is inflammatory to it. And also, sometimes people get to the point where they have to take a surgical option. So making sure that all of your health practitioners, all of the people, your medical physicians are the best that is available to you, so that they can help you navigate before the intervention of having to do something like a surgery. Because I actually have a friend who has Crohn's, and she found out very early in life, like when she was in high school, and they really rushed her in to surgery to remove part of her colon and to, push along that, to the point that now she is receiving different information, like perhaps they shouldn't have operated so quickly. Perhaps they should have waited and tried other options too. So, that is another condition that lets us know that our digestive system is super important. And I wanted to tell y'all, when we were really talking about health, is that even though it looks like when we eat things that now it's a part of our body, that's actually not really what our body is. Our body is kind of like, you ever see those little squishy things that like you can kind of like move them and they kind of squish, or like something like a sea cucumber, which is just like this animal. It looks like a cucumber, and it's just like its mouth is actually its, excreting area too. Well, technically we have our mouth, and then we have our, excreting area, and we're just technically one tube. So the way that our body absorbs the food is we chew it, it goes to the stomach acid, it starts to break down in our small intestine. And in our small intestines, that's when we start to absorb these macronutrients. The macronutrients would be carbohydrates, would be proteins, and would be fats. And then we absorb that, and then that is what we use in order to fuel ourselves. That is how everything is kind of working there. And then it goes through the large intestines as well. So the small intestine breaks it down, The large intestine is a part of that absorption process as well, and then we excrete that out. So technically, our food never goes into our body. It just goes through the system and we absorb it. That's why sometimes when, you know, you have like a little baby or something like that, they might have to put things in their, you know, their bottom as a way to absorb it very quickly, because that is how absorbent it is. And that's also important for you to have. I know this is going in another direction, but it's important for you to have routine bowel movements, because when your stool becomes impacted, your body is so sensitive in that area that, you know, when you're excreting your waste, you're also removing the toxins that your body's pushing out. And when you have that just sitting in your, you know, digestive tract, your body starts to reabsorb those toxins. So it's important to be excreting, to be having at least one movement a day. I know it's TMI, but it really isn't. It's actually very, very healthy for you to do that. Fiber is a great way as well. Dried fruits like figs and apricots are good for that too. Yes, things like apricots, they actually have like a lower GI index, and your GI index is what kind of causes your blood sugar to spike. Even though it is a fruit, even though it is sweet, because of that, things that have a low GI index, sometimes they can be a bit of laxative qualities too. So we think of things like prunes. So if you eat enough of these things, they will go right on through you. I'm flaring up really bad. Can the full moon have something to do with that? It depends on the flare up, but I also would like to let you all know that I know this sounds weird, but I used to do product demonstrations at like Whole Foods and Mom Organic markets. And one time I was at this Mom's Organic market, and this lady who was in the wellness section, she actually told me, like, do you do parasite cleanses? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you know, to cleanse out parasites in your digestive tract. And she just got me schooled. She basically said that, you know, depending on the hygiene of the food, you know, you might eat out. You don't know how clean things are. You don't know the quality of all of the meats and things that you have. Sometimes different parasites, bacteria, and even viruses can go through the digestive tract. And once they get there, they can have, you know, kind of eggs, and then they grow and things like that. Like, for example, like a tapeworm, pinworms, things like that, and other things too. So it's important to cleanse at least once or twice a year, because when you have that, they siphon off your nutrients. So it takes away from your vitality as well. And so using things like papaya seeds can help to get rid of that. Using things like black walnuts, black walnut tincture, you can use that as well. Oh, it's so bitter. It tastes so gross, but it helps to flush that out. And you might be, you know, surprised. Also, it's just good and balancing. But again, you got to make sure that you're not taking anything that would be counterproductive for your specific constitution and body. But the reason why I brought that up is because the eggs hatch on the full moon. And so when you have kids with really, really poor diets, eat a lot of sugar, eat a lot of junk food, that is the perfect environment for those kinds of, like, you know, parasites and things like that. So if the kid starts to feel very irritable around the full moon, she had said that that's kind of something that could be happening, that could happen. And that also can happen in the pets too. So if you feel your pets get a little weird, I know that's kind of TMI, but these are things that, you know, kind of life things that I feel like we should all know. But, you know, everything has to be super cute and super prissy all the time. But it's like, nah, baby, you got to be healthy. We have lavender, we have sweet violet, and we have hawthorn. So let's get into this. Oh, wow, we've been on for a while. We're going to have to start wrapping this up, y'all. Let me see, 64. So we're all talking about healing. I told you the healing was going to get deep. Hawthorn. Let me see if you can see it. Yes, this is hawthorn. Hawthorne remembers a time when local gods watched over, oh, let me put that there, knolls and wells, frolicking and making mischief in her branches. She remembers her limbs hung with strands of beads, glittering in the sun, and scraps of fabric fluttering in the wind like prayer flags, offering to the land itself and to the gods who kept alive the vital conduit between spirit and matter. Those days were mostly past, but Hawthorne holds the portal open, knowing these interconnections provide true nourishment to keep the heart whole. If Hawthorne appears for you, strengthening your heart and guarding it from homesickness by tending the connections between the spirit realm and the material world. So that's important because Mercury in retrograde in Gemini has kind of like lifted the veil so we can communicate better underneath the veil. Energetic helpers, guides, ancestors, angels, that those energies out there. And so if there's some work that needs to be done, you can feel free to communicate with that energy as well. And lavender, which is tough love. People think lavender is soft, useful for shaping quiet space and calming rowdy children, but beneath her powdery scent is a hint of menthol. Smell it. That bite at the back of your palate. While lavender appears to be the down-to-earth and gracious grandmother who will soothe your soul and sing you to sleep, you're living a rare and blessed life, and that's all that you ever need from her. If circumstances should change, call on lavender. She'll give emergencies with military precision, keeping a cool head and a stout heart. She'd make a fine spy, field nurse, or leader of the resistance, cloaking her steely strength under a sloppy gray bun and the familiar scent of summer. When lavender appears, it's time to ground yourself and dig into the task at hand. Okay. And last but certainly not least, we have sweet violet. Sweet, sweet violet sings of sun in springtime, carpeting the meadows and lawns with lush purple petals. But the glorious show is mere flirtation. Her true abundance comes from autumn, when quietly and with little fanfare, she shares her seeds with the earth, setting the stage for next spring's performance. Violet has no trouble separating public from private. She knows both have their place and season. She's the gossip column socialite who quietly works in a soup kitchen on Wednesdays, knowing life's more important work isn't always done in the public eye. So that has everything to do with shadow work. Wonderful, wonderful. This is such a fantastic place to learn so much more than just tarot things. It's wonderful. Red clover, also a great woman's herb. It treats and prevents infections and aids in fertility. Yes, when I put up, I think it was red clover or lady's mantle, they talked about progesterone. So I think that might be an endocrine issue as well, regulating that. Oh, I need to look into that. I haven't been having my period in the last few months. If you haven't been having your period in the last few months, what you want to do is you want to go talk to your doctor and you want them to test your hormones. So they call them your sex hormones. So that would be your progesterone, your estrogen, and the androgens like testosterone and things like that. And so that will better help you understand what's going on there, and it'll let you know where the levels are at with that. So I know I know the Sufis for Islam, correct, and the Kabbalah for Judaism. Is there a Christian mystic tradition? There's probably many more in each one of these examples. For Christianity, you can even think of something simple like the laying of hands. Like, you ever heard of a revival or something, like, put the hands on you, you're in the chair, and now, oh, you can get up and you can walk, or something like that. Or even the healing work. It's very fascinating. When I was predominantly a client and going to my first healers, I think what really threw me off was how many of them were very like Christian. And that just threw me off, because I was like, how are you doing this without people like, shunning you for this? But they understood that their faith had nothing to do with the religion as a whole. They didn't necessarily felt like they needed to ask permission for the religion as a whole. So I had seen some healers specifically being trained out of a Mexican tradition that had originated from Oaxaca, that had this connection of Catholicism. There was another person I went to, also a strong connection to Christianity. So it can come across in the mediumship and clairvoyance work too. So there's probably actually a lot of examples that show up in it as well. When Christians, Jews, and Islam scholars all work together and were in dialogue together, the philosophy and theology from that time period is bananas. Oh my gosh, yes, that is so true. Because remember in Egypt, the Library of Alexandria was a place where scholars would come, and they would kind of learn the most basically the forward thinking philosophy and science of the time. But it was very give and take. We could come and have a scholarly conversation. And the burning of Alexandria probably set our civilization or our species back, thousands of years, because of what they were able to accomplish together. I don't think how I'm ever going to be okay with the fact that I'm just a big tube. Well, that's better than realizing that we're just basically a sack to hold all of these bacteria in us. Like, we have like millions of good bacteria in our body that like does this service of providing us an immune system. And like, even our cravings, the things that we like to eat, it can also be an indication of the bacteria. So sometimes when we have a unhealthy balance of the bad bacteria, or things like bacteria and fungus and stuff like that, they start to crave things. So like, if you eat a lot of sugar, you can have an overgrowth of yeast. And so they will start craving more sugar. So you yourself will have cravings too. It is completely fascinating. Very, very fascinating. That's just health advice. It would be TMI if you talked about you having a bowel movement. Healthy to prissy. Such pretty cards. Blood moon tarot lunar eclipse will occur on May 15th through the 16th, later tonight around 10 or so. So this eclipse will happen at around 12:40 to 4 a.m. EST. And so you just have to calculate that to wherever you're at. It will be visible in the parts of the Americas, Antarctica, Europe, Africa, and the East Pacific, New Zealand, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. Oh, I tried and they said that they didn't find anything abnormal and everything looked normal. Well, you do know that it is not normal to not be having the cycle. And oftentimes what you have to do is you have to find a specialist. So what you should do, if you can afford it, is find a functional medicine practitioner. And this is a game changer. They are a game changer. A functional medicine practitioner. They are medical doctors who went to medical school, but they treat in the way that alternative medicine doctors treat. So they don't just treat the symptoms, which is like, oh, okay, you're not hemorrhaging, so you're fine, you'll be okay for now. but they treat the origin of the problem. So I'm going to write that in the chat. Functional medicine doctor. They're also called practitioners. And in my podcast, Organize Your Purpose, I actually did an episode with my doctor, my personal functional medicine doctor. And she really talked a lot about gut health and stuff like that. So you can go to Organize Your Purpose on YouTube, not YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Music, all of that kind of streaming platforms, and listen to the episode. Her name is Dr. Sisu. And, you know, a lot of times in our kind of everyday medicine now, it's just not really set up to solve problems. It's kind of only really set up to kind of deal with symptoms. So it took many doctors before I got to her. And actually, I found out that the autoimmune condition that I had was a production, or it basically, it was created from having long-term heavy metal exposure and long-term mycotoxin exposure. So if you all remember when I talked about that I was in that apartment and I had a significant other there too, and we had long-term mold exposure. Well, mycotoxins come from mold. And what happened to me is I developed urticaria, cholinergic urticaria. So my body would have an allergic reaction when the body temperature would change. And she developed, or further developed her, I guess, genetic predisposition for multiple sclerosis, or MS. So it showed up in us in different ways. And the reason why there's a connection here is because my doctor told me, wait a minute, she has MS. I'm like, yeah. And she was like, there is a correlation between mold exposure and the development of MS. So even if somebody has the genetic potential to have it, you need to have the right environment as well for it to, you know, come out and it start to show symptoms and things like that. So finding a functional medicine doctor, functional medicine practitioner can be a game changer, because sometimes these doctors will make you feel crazy too. They make you feel like everything's okay. I had migraines for a very long time, and I have what's called chronic episodic migraines with aura. So it's like I see aura. I have aura in language, aura in touch as well, aura in vision, meaning I'll see the aura, I'll lose peripheral sight, I'll lose language, so I'll lose words. I'm not able to say words, and then I'm in excruciating pain, so I can't really, you know, do anything. It's just the nausea and stuff like that. And I went to this, you know, top doctor or whatever, and when I was trying to explain that I was struggling finding medication that would work when I would have it, he was like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And I was like, He was like, I see people who have migraines for, they have what is called chronic long-term migraines for days. Is not that bad. And so I told him, I was like, well, here's the thing. It's a situation in which it's not like, if you all ever had a hangover where it's just like you feel bad, you're in a space you don't feel good. It's not like that. It's like kind of like 10 times worse, where you're just in such a great amount of pain that you can't even function. Like I wouldn't be able to get up and drive myself. I can barely move, you know, and having to go through this very intense thing, like that. I mean, he was talking to me like I was crazy. And then I realized, getting my micronutrients checked, I realized I was deficient in magnesium. So for those who deal with migraine issues, look into CoQ10, look into vitamin B2, which is riboflavin, and look into magnesium. These are things that people have used in order to help. And my neurologist also confirmed that those were things that people have used before in order to help with that. So it's interesting how these deficiencies play out in our life as well. You are a wealth of information for the newbies, and I'm so glad that this was my first time. You rock. Well, welcome, babies. Oh, that is beautiful. The laying of hands. So much love coming through. It's powerful. Yeah, I know. That makes me sad. I want to be able to have children. Oh, I have to look into that. And yes, it's very important to know that specifically for you, even not having a cycle may indicate something in the brain, meaning like an issue. So for example, like the brain has to communicate with the endocrine system to say, like, send this level of progesterone in order to create this, and then drop this level of estrogen in order to do this, and during this time, that's when you will have the cycle and things like that. So if there is a malfunction in the brain, the central nervous system, and that's what I was talking about earlier when I said that the brain is not in homeostasis, that is an issue there. Like, is there a hypothalamus issue? Is there a pituitary gland issue? Is it connected to a thyroid issue? So there's so many things that you can look into to better understand, but understand that sometimes doctors, even gynecologists, they are not necessarily specialists in that particular thing. They might be generalists in that they're able to say, well, let's just give you birth control and see, if that'll do something. But you might, as I said before, go to a functional medicine doctor, practitioner, who can be able to go and do those tests that you wouldn't normally get, and be able to kind of monitor you over time. I just started working with a naturopathic doctor. Looking forward to my treatment with her. Yes, naturopathic doctors are doctors that go. They have boards like allopathic medical doctors, which are the regular doctors that we see. But the naturopathic doctors, they have their own version of med school. They have to get licensed. They have all of that as well too. Heavy metals, as in the music. Heavy metals, as in, if you eat a lot of tuna and things like that, there's a lot of metal in there. And when you ingest things that have a lot of metal, it starts to mess with your system as a whole, neurologically too. I have partial seizures where I hallucinate, and it's like dreaming with my eyes open, but I've had MRIs and tested for epilepsy and stuff, nothing, nada, but they make me nauseous too. Yes, I really feel like find this functional medicine doctor so they can connect the dots. No, I think the metal, like iron. The metal would be something like if you have like too much aluminum or something like that. That's scary, feels like going crazy. Absolutely empathize. I had migraines fluctuating between a 10 and a 6 for about a year. I totally understand. There's something called a functional neurological disorder that's essentially psychological but can manifest as non-epileptic seizures. Stephanie, I don't know your situation, but worth checking out. Yeah, definitely check that out. And I just want to put another note in there that sometimes there are conditions called psychosomatic conditions. And for a long time, migraines were thought to be exclusively a part of that. Now we have more data to understand that, there's other kind of chemistry happening in the brain that makes the migraine happen. For example, what you eat, or like the type of environment that you're in, these triggers that can bring that on. But psychosomatic means, like, for example, you have a very stressful situation, trauma. Maybe you have a lot of stress at work or something like that. And then that leads to something like a heart attack, or a person who is so nurturing and so giving, and they give and they're always like put themselves last, and they start to neglect the physical body. And sometimes this manifests as things like chest issues, like breast cancer and things like that. So there are these issues that start on the inside energetically, and then they start to manifest in the physical and on the outside. So when we are going on our healing journey and we're seeking treatment, especially if you're lucky enough to have health insurance, you're seeking this treatment, you also have to do the energy work to cleanse that out and to change the mentality that got you there. Sometimes things are physical, in which you're in environment, you're around certain fumes that are doing that as well. And there are also internal subtle things as well too, in which you cannot be in a high stress environment if you have a heart problem. That wouldn't be good, for you. But it's just interesting how those things manifest in the physical body. Well, everybody, I think we have been rocking it out for, this is the longest I think that we've ever been on here. Yeah, we've been on here for a good long time. So just to give a nice brief recap, this is the blood moon. It is in the sign of Scorpio. The theme here is you have to break a karmic cycle. You have to give up a codependency. You have to give up a toxic behavior in order to heal. This is a total lunar eclipse. It's going to be happening between the hours of about 12:40 a.m. to 4 a.m. EST. Really pay attention to your dreams today too. Let me see. Total lunar eclipse. It's also a full moon. So that is typically the time of celebration, but this is a celebration of your healing as well. So doing what you need to do to celebrate this healing path. I've been, stay blessed, stay safe, beautiful. I've been searching for a diagnosis for 3 years. I can tell it's caused by stress, but it manifests as heart issues, tummy problems, and seizures. So we're to tune in right as that was discussed. Yes. And like I was saying before, if you can and have the ability, find a functional medicine practitioner who can go in and look at the individual health things you have. They can run medical labs, and they can treat you in less invasive ways too. But I also wanted to make a note to explain the spiritual or the esoteric connections that happen. Sometimes what we describe as migraines, what is being described as mental health episodes, what is described as different things, can also be related to the esoteric as well. Especially if you receive visions, if you receive information during those times. Now, if that happens to be you, it's not everyone, but if it happens to be you, you have to learn how to train to tap into those abilities, because sometimes if you refuse to tap into the abilities, they kind of just force their way out of you. So you have to learn how to kind of reel that in and to focus on developing and curating and working through your craft. So that's also something that comes up as well. Well, everybody, I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed this. We are coming back, I think, next week. Let me look at the schedule first. I'm pretty sure we're coming back next week. And next week is going to be June's predictive read. And I'm pretty sure that's a time where I let you ask questions too. So that can come up too. I've had such a fun time today. This was so fantastic. I love talking about healing and all of that stuff. And I think this was the perfect space. This is the perfect time. If you tuned in today, you were supposed to hear this message, and what people said in the chat and what you felt within yourself and what I said, it is all a part of your healing journey, and it's going to help you to get you to your next level. So everybody, loved spending time with you. Thank you for the donation. And as well, if you would like a tarot reading through me or with me, you can sign up with the link in the description box. I'm getting tired, y'all. The readings, they go very quickly. So May is already full, but June will be open soon. So if you want to get that first notice, those are the only people that I kind of open the books up to. But everybody, I had a great time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Remember, what you're supposed to do is you can write something down. You could burn it at that time between 12:40 and 4 a.m. You can stay up, or you can go to sleep and wake up early. Or you can do the work in your dream world as well too. That's a whole nother rabbit hole for a whole nother day. But you all stay well, stay loved, stay blessed, continue to heal, and go through this process. You got this. Okay, bye everybody. Bye.